We are just 3 days out from Election Day, and nearly 67 million Americans have already cast their ballot. That's a lot of people, folks. Target Smart now has details about who is voting early this year. Registered Democrats are outpacing registered Republicans by just 1 point in the early vote. But women, they are showing up in greater numbers than men by nearly a 10-point margin. Now, if that trend holds, it could be a game changer for the Harris campaign. Last night in Wisconsin, Harris reminded voters why their voices matter.
Let us be intentional about building community. Let us be intentional about building coalitions. Let us remind each other and others that we have so much more in common than what separates us. Let us do that. There is power in that. It will strengthen our country. And we'll remind folks also, your vote is your voice, and your voice is your power.
Joining us now is former Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill. She is an MSNBC political analyst and the host of the How to Win podcast. Obviously, someone that knows a lot about elections.
Good morning, Senator. Welcome to the table.
Hey, it's good to be on the weekend. Let's go.
Let's rock and roll. The Senator's in the house.
I'm not dancing, Michael. I'm not doing it.
I just dropped the mic for the Senator. Look, this is what's interesting about this moment, and I liked the way we came into this conversation because I want to pick up on what the Vice President was saying about your voice being your vote being your voice, and your voice is the power you have. She talks about making progress, and I want to ask you whether or not that's something that's finally beginning to resonate with voters. Let's take a listen to the Vice President on making progress.
I am not looking to score political points. I am looking to make progress. I pledge to listen to those who will be impacted by the decisions I make. I pledge to listen to experts, to listen to people who disagree with me. Unlike Donald Trump, I don't believe that people who disagree with me are the enemy. He wants to put them in jail. I'll give them a seat at the table.
With more and more stories coming out of American families, communities around the country of women facing draconian abortion laws in which their lives are at stake, the politics of Donald Trump in the last few weeks being more divisive, more ugly, does this idea finally resonate with voters out there as they're going to the polls that this democracy is worth keeping? A president is someone who should lead us, not create fear in us. How do you see her closing message resonating with voters as they're now in the booth?
Well, I think, the fact that she's aspirational and hopeful and positive and saying that we can all get along, and I'm willing to listen to people who disagree with me and not sick the police or the military after them, I think it's a big deal. But the other interesting thing about this closing argument, when she says your vote is your voice, underlying that is the fact that it's intensely personal and private. And what I've been fascinated by is how the Trump campaign has reacted to the notion that a woman has the right to go in the ballot box and vote however she wants and never tell anybody.
It really ticks them off.
And all of a sudden they're talking about how dare a woman not vote the way her husband does, and how dare a woman, lie to her husband about how she's voting. And I think
that helps the argument.
I think even Charlie Kirk said something nutty like he's given her a good life, and how dare she not, obey what he says. And then Trump says things like, I'm going to take care of you whether you like it or not. They keep stumbling over the fact women are frankly not going to respond to you are our agent. Women, men are in charge. And his whole thing about trying to get the bros out to vote, every time he does that, every time Hulk Hogan rips off his shirt, there's another suburban Republican woman that said, nope, not doing that. Not doing that.
If I have to hear Macho Man one more time at a rally,
or
then I'm out of here.
Or it's a man's world.
There are positive indicators for Democrats. You saw the Gallup polling, sort of looking at the enthusiasm between Democrats and Republicans. That's one indicator. But you sort of had a different indicator that you talked about with me in the makeup room, and that's where Donald Trump is choosing to be in these last days.
Yeah, I think that him going to New Mexico was just a head fake. But he's going to North Carolina 4 times. You know, if you're a Republican and you're going to North Carolina 4 times in the last 2 days of the campaign, you're worried about North Carolina. And they're sending him there because their internal data is telling them that she's doing better there than I think perhaps the polling is showing us right now.
Which you think is about what?
I think it is more about a high percentage of college-educated folks in North Carolina, a significant vote of color, much higher than Wisconsin. And those are, you know, those are places where she is really distancing herself. And I think, frankly, some of it is they really bumbled, I think, the hurricane relief stuff. People on the ground know they're getting help. People on the ground know that FEMA has been there. They know. Maybe the small little percentage of the cult wants to believe some of the conspiracy theories, but most North Carolinians know the federal government responded and responded well, and it made him look like a liar once again, which is almost as common as the sun coming up.
Talk about it now, Senator. Look, what I have really been struck by in this entire election, particularly since the vice president became at the top of the ticket, while Donald Trump says volatile things on the campaign trail, he, you know, is talking about his enemies. He's doing all of these things. The campaign, the Harris campaign, has been very consistent in the ads that they are running. And they are talking about, they've done a lot of bio ads, right, introducing her to folks. They're doing the contrast, making sure people see what Donald Trump has said. But she's also talking affirmatively about her economic message. And I think that's also part of why it's resonating. I want to play a little bit of Vice President Harris on Donald Trump's sales tax. This was Friday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
His answer to the financial pressures you face is the same as it was the last time. Another $1 trillion in tax cuts for billionaires and the biggest corporations. This time he will pay for it with a 20% national sales tax on everything you buy that is imported. Clothes, foods, toys, cell phones. A Trump sales tax that would cost the average American family, the economists have measured it, more than $4,000 more a year.
It's given laser focus on the things Americans care about, Claire.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I think she's also going for some of those squishy Republicans with this argument. Because, as I've said a number of times, I think about 1/3 of the people voting for Trump don't believe what he says about using the military against American citizens, about mass deportation. But he can do tariffs without Congress. And the more she talks about this and the economic disruption that would occur, I mean, even Musk has admitted there will be a massive economic disruption if their plans are put into place. Now, he says it'll recover and everything will be fine. But to most Americans that are voting for Trump, they don't believe in what he says. They do believe they're going to keep their tax cut. But many of them are very educated and many of them are very wealthy. And I think when they start really digesting what the economists have said about Trump's plans and what it would do to the economy, I think she may be not only appealing to America's families with some of her specific plans, but also maybe appealing to some of those Republicans who don't like Trump that are just voting to keep their tax cut.
I think the exciting part about this stage of the campaign, and it's something that Democrats have throughout modern history been very, very good at, is sort of using friends to come in and sort of contextualize the sometimes complicated political narrative. Yet Cardi B last night sort of breaking it down for a lot of folks. And let's take a quick listen to her in Milwaukee talking about the conning of by Donald Trump.
Tomorrow, he'll be conning you out of your health care rights. And that's a fact. I want you to hear that again. Today, he's hustling you with the, oh, buy my sneakers. Tomorrow is going to be your health care rights. He's going to take it away from you. He's going to snatch it. Donald Trump talks about how he has a concept of a plan, But America, the only concept of a plan he has is a plan to hustle you.
And that's been Donald Trump's MO from back in the day in the 1980s in New York. I mean, it's always about the hustle. And to sort of put that out there, I think, with real voices, matters at this stage of the game, particularly for a lot of young voters who are voting for the first time or just coming into this process and really trying to contextualize these complicated plans around health care and things like that. The bottom line is he's giving you sneakers. She's talking about keeping your health care.
Yeah, and I, the sad thing for me is that I think the pandemic wiped out people's memory of the first 2 years of the Trump term. I remember it well. I was a United States Senator at the time. I remember how hard he worked to try to overturn everything in Obamacare, from protecting you on pre-existing conditions to letting your kids stay on your plans till they're 26. He wanted to wipe all of it out, and he came this close. But you know what he didn't come close on? Building a wall. You know what he didn't come close on? Immigration reform. You know what he didn't come close on? All of the stuff he's talking about now. He failed. And he had a Republican Congress. He had a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and he couldn't get the wall built. And by the way, Mexico didn't pay a dime. So if you're hustled once, back in 2016,
right.
it's like the pandemic wiped out the memory. You were hustled once, and now you're going, sign me up again. I want to be hustled again. Con me, lie to me. I'm down.
Can I just say my favorite tweet was from you, Simone, on this, which is imagining the conversation between the comms staff on the Harris campaign and the person who actually works with Cardi being like, what's she going to say?
What's she gonna say?
Can we see some remarks?
It's all right here, baby. Claire, we want you to stick
They're
around.
like, Cardi gonna read from that. She's gonna read from that phone, honey. Claire McCaskill Claire's in here on a riff, y'all. She preaching.
I love it.
I just would like to note that Cardi B said she was not going to vote this election.
Yes.
And when Vice President Harris became the top of the ticket, Cardi B said, she feels like she needs to get engaged and get involved, and she's concerned about her health care. Something is happening here.
Yeah.
They are poisoning the blood of America. So what he's saying is the ideal version of America is a white America. And anytime brown people infiltrate America, they're messing up the blood of America. They're messing up the gene pool of America. And that takes us back to Hitler. I just can't imagine. It couldn't be me, a black man voting for somebody who believes so deeply that black men are inferior to him.
And as an Asian American woman, it couldn't and it won't be me either. Joining me now from his home state of Ohio is Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Award-winning superstar John Legend. John, it is an honor to have you on the show. You've been very vocal about Donald Trump and his racist rhetoric after his comments, absurdly, about Haitians eating cats and dogs. We heard similar racist remarks at his Madison Square Garden rally last Sunday. How disgusted are you with Trump and the GOP's blatant continued dehumanization of immigrants?
Well, of course, it's disgusting. And, it's not shocking in the sense that we've seen so much of this from Donald Trump for such a long time. His entire career in public life, he's been spewing hatred and division, and particularly targeting people of color as somehow tainting the American blood and American gene pool. Really, frankly, very Nazi-related rhetoric, eugenic-related rhetoric, and it's really hateful. It's really divisive. And it's not what we need in a leader who's supposed to lead the entire country. Our country is diverse and beautiful, and folks come from all over the world to live here. And we should have a president that wants to lead the entire country and serve the entire country.
You're on the ground in Ohio today, campaigning for several Ohio Democrats, including...
I'm actually in Pennsylvania today.
Oh, okay.
But I have been in Ohio very recently campaigning, and of course I've been supporting my good friend, Senator Sherrod Brown, for re-election.
Yeah, and thanks for correcting me. I know that you have been stumping for Sherrod Brown. He's in a really tight race against Trump-backed businessman Bernie Moreno. Why was it so important for you to lend your voice to this particular race?
Well, of course, I'm from Springfield, Ohio, the infamous Springfield, Ohio, and I grew up in a family of blue-collar workers. My dad was an auto factory worker, a UAW union member, and I just understand what the stakes are for families like mine, and I know that Sherrod Brown understands what they are as well. He cares about making sure we raise the minimum wage and make sure that the Affordable Care Act is protected for workers and people who need affordable coverage. He cares so much about workers, and he always has. Anybody who knows Sherrod Brown and has observed him over the years, he's always standing up for ordinary people. He's always standing up for working people, always talking about the dignity of work, and he's the perfect senator for the great state of Ohio.
You know, understandably, there's a lot of focus on the presidential race, but talk about the importance of making sure that people vote smart in all of the down ballot races.
Well, you need to vote for someone who's going to be in Washington and in the State House advocating for you. And Sherrod Brown has shown consistently that he's going to advocate for Ohioans, no matter if they voted for him or not. He's able to work across the aisle. He's able to do what needs to be done to look out for the best interests of Ohioans.
You performed earlier this week at a rally in Philly for the Harris Walls campaign. I want to ask you the same question that I asked Robert De Niro a few minutes ago. Why is Kamala Harris the answer that America needs to move forward?
Well, you've seen the hate and the division that Donald Trump spreads, the sense of vengeance and wanting to get back at his enemies. And he spends every day focused on his enemies, his grievances, and his own personal issues. When I believe Kamala Harris will go to Washington as the president of the United States. She's already there as the vice president. But as the president, as our leader, I think she'll go to work every day, focused on the problems of everyday Americans. She's been going around the country, speaking to folks, learning what their issues are, learning about their difficulties with housing affordability and cost of living, and really coming up with ideas and plans to address those issues. And like she says, she'll go to work with a to-do list, not an enemies list, and she'll be focused on the problems that everyday Americans are facing.
What's your closing argument to those voters that haven't done early voting, that are going to be voting between now and Tuesday as they decide the most consequential election in our lifetimes?
Well, just vote for someone who cares about you. Vote for someone who's thinking about you and is trying to solve your problems. And I think if you do that, you'll come up with the right answer and do what's best for the country, too.
I want to thank you, John Legend, for joining me today and for all of your advocacy. I know you're incredibly busy, but you're making sure that people are out there being informed and making the right decisions for themselves. Thanks for being here. You recently just went to rally for the Harris Walls campaign in Pennsylvania, a battleground state. Why was it so important for you to not rely on someone else's voice, but to use your own to share why you thought that Kamala Harris is the right decision?
Because it's important. It's not. This is the moment of truth, and I can't sit by and allow this to happen. So wherever I can contribute to a positive ending to this whole thing, I'm going to try my best to do that.
Why is Kamala Harris the answer?
She's the only answer at this point, obviously, but she happens to be a great answer. And with all the misinformation, disinformation, nonsense that the Trump campaign is trying to do to discredit her, you know, it's a shame because certain people in certain parts of the country, they don't even hear, they only hear what he says or sound bites. They don't hear the truth. And I say, well, you know, so many people are so passionate about on his side and we're on our side, but I gotta say, there is a difference. He's a criminal. Kamala Harris is not a criminal. Joe Biden is not part of a crime family. And he knows that, and I'm sure a lot of people with him know that, especially the Republicans that are supposed to defend this country and oppose him, they know that. It's a disgrace.
One of the greatest attributes of Kamala Harris's professional experience is her role as a prosecutor. And she's been hitting the campaign trail, prosecuting the case against Donald Trump.
This is not a candidate for president who is thinking about how to make your life better. This is someone who is unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power.
But she's also out there making the case for the Harris-Walz administration, the idea of what she brings to the table. Why is Kamala Harris for America the answer on how to move forward?
Because she's doing what's right. She's doing the right thing. And it's that simple. Look, people make mistakes here and there, of course, but she's going in the right direction. And everybody knows that. No matter what you say, you disagree with her, you vote for Trump, she's going in the right direction. We have no choice. If you care about this country, you care about sanity, you have to vote for her. You have to. That's it, end of story.
Trump, J.D. Vance, the Republicans right now, they're destroying the idea of the American dream. They're sending the message to immigrants, don't come here, we don't want you here. I mean, they're also pushing white supremacy through the Great Replacement theory. We heard that as well at Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president.
Cool black guy with a thing on his head. What the hell is that? A lampshade? Look at this guy. I'm just kidding. That's one of my buddies. He had a Halloween party last night. We had fun. We carved watermelons together. It was awesome.
America is for Americans and Americans only.
What's happening to the American dream?
I don't know. I think that people have lost sight of what the American dream is. And maybe it's because in schools it's not been taught enough, civic education, whatever you want to call it. People are not aware. Young people are not aware. Some are apathetic. I mean, I know even when I was younger, when I was watching the Watergate hearings and Nixon and and all that stuff, I wasn't apathetic, but I said it'll work itself out. But now I'm older and I see it's not that way. These things are it's much worse now than it was with Nixon. He's a Boy Scout compared to Trump.
We also heard from Trump saying that anybody who opposes him is the enemy within. That's the language he uses.
When I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy, becomes a sound. Oh, how can he say? No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within. But this is who we're fighting.
He's talking about himself. The enemy within. He is the enemy within. He's projecting everything he says. It gets back to intimidation. That's the key. Intimidation. People cannot be intimidated by him. They have to stop and think. That's why it's so important. The Washington Post, he should have said, let me just wait a minute. People look up to him. I look up to him, that he's going to make the right decision, especially in his position.
Jeff Bezos.
Yes. Everybody's taking a chance by doing this stuff, but you have to. You're going to live under this guy's being the president?
And we've seen what's happened when he actually has the office.
It's craziness, insanity.
Trump says, I'll be a dictator on day one.
Yes, he's telling everybody. And
are people listening?
I hope they are really listening.
You have dozens of former Trump administration officials, the people that worked side by side, day in, day out with Donald Trump in his first administration. They refuse to endorse him or support him. In fact, Mike Pence, for example, the vice president with him, who almost got hanged on January 6th, he's not the vice presidential candidate with Donald Trump. But notably, these former Trump administration officials, they know what he's capable of. They also know what he's not capable of. You and I both know you run businesses as well. A board of directors would fire Trump, somebody like that, years ago. Isn't it time that America tells Donald Trump, you're fired?
Of course, he wouldn't. I don't see him lasting in anything.
What's your closing argument to those inexplicable voters out there that seem to be undecided at this moment?
When in doubt, there is no doubt. Maybe I'm pushing it a little in the direction of Kamala Harris, but that to me is what it means. If you have a doubt about what your decision should be, just look at what Trump has done and look at what she can do. Look who he's for himself. And look what she says she's for, and she is for. It's for the people, the American people. She's there for a reason.
It's kind of the do or die moment for America.
Yeah. Yep.
Doing the right thing.
Do the right thing. People know that they have to stop and think for a minute when they're alone voting and nobody knows but them to do the right thing.
Because nobody will know who you vote for, and that anonymity, as absurd as it sounds, would protect you from any type of backlash you would get from the Donald Trumps.
And you might have to, even if your spouse or significant other is going to vote and feels very strongly for him, you might have to just do what you have to do, and that's that. And they don't have to know, but you have to vote your conscience.
Joining me now is the independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. He's the chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. He's also a member of a number of other committees, including the Veterans Affairs and Budget Committee. Senator, it is great to see you. You and I have had so many opportunities over the last few years to talk about health care, about climate, in the last year about Israel and Gaza. We'll touch on all those things in a minute. But here I want to go back to something that you've been talking to us about literally for 4 decades. You have been warning that the billionaires are controlling both our political system and our economy. Up till now, the billionaires have largely not agreed with you. They've sort of said, whatever, we're just doing our thing in quiet. That's all changed. Donald Trump has his own emotional support billionaires right now, and they're saying the quiet parts out loud. They are out there needing him to win so that their hegemony can continue.
Well, what you are seeing as a result of Citizens United is really the undermining of American democracy in a way that we have never seen. You have a small number of billionaires pouring hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, led by Elon Musk and Mrs. Adelson and others, into Donald Trump. Billionaires are also there for Harris. The bottom line is that while we got to elect Harris on Tuesday, our long-term goal is to get big money out of the political process, get rid of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, and move to public funding of elections. Or else, at a time when a handful of billionaires control the economy, they are also going to control completely our political system. And that is not the direction in which we should be going.
And you made a remarkable closing argument that you posted to the internet the other day. It's gone around, and I wanted to talk to you about this because the point you are making is salient. This may actually be the difference between winning and losing for Kamala Harris, and that is there are many places, many topics on which you do not agree with the Biden administration. You do not agree with Kamala Harris. You do not agree with a lot of Democrats. But you have decided that you would like to support the candidate over whom you may have the greatest influence, against whom you may protest, who will not do more damage than good in the end. This is an important conversation that a lot of uncommitted voters need to hear. A lot of people who are pretending they want to sit on their hands or vote for a third candidate need to hear right now that the presidency is not a custom-made suit for you. It is the best bet you have. You vote for the person who you think is going to be better, not worse.
Look, I've been running around the country doing my best to see that Kamala is our next president. And it's not just that Trump is trying to undermine American democracy. It's not just that Trump literally does not believe that climate change is real. He thinks it's a hoax, which means if he's elected, the struggle against climate change is over, and God knows, God only knows what kind of planet our kids and future generations will inherit. It's not only that we struggle to make sure that women have the constitutional right to control their own bodies, but as you've just said, Ali, I think there are a lot of people out there who strongly disagree with Biden and Harris on Gaza, and count me in as one of those people. In fact, as soon as Congress reconvenes, I have a resolution. It's going to get to the floor of the Senate, which says no more offensive arms sales to this horrific Netanyahu government that is laying waste to the Palestinians in Gaza. Horrific humanitarian disaster. I disagree with Biden and Harris on that. But what I want to say to the people who are going to sit it out, even on that issue, forget climate change, forget income and wealth inequality. Trump wants to give more tax breaks to billionaires. Forget women's rights. Even on that issue, the Republicans are far, far worse than the Democrats. At a time when children are facing mass malnutrition and starvation in Gaza, when Gaza has been leveled by Netanyahu, we cannot get the Republicans to put one nickel into humanitarian aid to feed starving children in Gaza. So even on that issue, we will have much more leverage over the Harris administration than we will over the Trump administration. Trump and Netanyahu are both right-wing extremists. They're in bed together. So I would hope very much that people who are thinking of sitting it out, maybe voting third party, please don't do that. Because even on this issue, we have a better shot to bring about change in U.S. policy with Harris in the White House than with Trump.
We've largely, through the course of this election, avoided the conversation about health care. You, again, do not feel that the current administration has gone as far as you'd like. You and I share a view that America should have universal health care, bottom line, like every other developed country does. They've started talking about it again. Donald Trump and Mike Johnson are floating this idea that they're going to get rid of even Obamacare. But Donald Trump, when asked in the debate what his idea was, he said he's got a concept of health care. A concept. We've been talking about health care in this country for 100 years, and he's got a concept. Not actually a plan.
And he was president for 4 years, right?
Right.
Been actively involved in politics for 12 years, and he has a concept. Look, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, has provided subsidies to many millions of people. It has helped people. But I think the vast majority of the American people understand the current healthcare system is broken. It's dysfunctional. Its main function is to provide huge profits for the insurance industry and for the drug companies, and that it is doing. The industries are making huge profits. We need, as you've just indicated, to do what every other major country on earth does. And at a time when we're spending twice as much per capita on health care as other people, yeah, we need to move to a Medicare for all, single-payer system, no out-of-pocket expenses, go to any doctor you want. We need to substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs so we're not paying 5 times as much as the people in other countries for the same drug. And by the way, on that area, I think the Biden-Harris team, and we've been working with them, has done a good job. We are seeing some reductions in prescription drug prices, but we've got to continue that.
But partially that's because people like you have been a gadfly in this, and that is your proof.
And back with me as well, we have Antoine Seawright and Brendan Buck. So to both of you, I'm going to ask this question. I'll go to you first, Antoine. Based on what you just heard from Tom, what you're seeing and hearing from contacts, which candidate has the easiest or the clearest path to 270?
Well, you can't make assumptions because objects in the rear, as my father taught me when I was driving, are closer than they appear. And so this roller coaster ride that has many Americans dizzy and politically seasick is coming to an end. But when you check the hood, all the numbers that Tom just mentioned look very promising and positive for Democrats. However, we have to run through the tape and make no assumptions because we've seen in elections in the past where Trump supporters can tune in late out of anger and frustration or their sense of what has happened before Election Day.
Okay. What do you think of what you heard from Tom?
Yeah, I struggle to make too much out of early voting, other than the Republican and Trump persuasion to get Republicans to early vote seems to be working to some degree. Obviously, we've seen an increase. We don't know if that means a whole lot, although there is a reason you tell people to vote early, because that means you don't have to worry about them showing up on Election Day. So that is net good, but it could just be cannibalizing the Election Day vote. We have no idea. I think you have to look at this and say that Donald Trump clearly has the easier route. the South, it looks like it is, in my opinion, very unlikely that Kamala Harris is going to make many inroads in southern states. I think Georgia's back in the Republican column. Nevada, Arizona seem tough. So I think it goes back to that same blue wall that we long talked about, even going back to the Joe Biden. That was his only real approach. I think she has to win those three. That's where obviously she's devoting a lot of her time and energy. I just don't see a whole lot of other paths for her, whereas Donald Trump may have more options.
Antoine wants to get in there. What do you have to say?
Yeah, Alex, I think the one strategy that we have locked in on, and it makes sense, is putting fresh paint on that blue wall. And in doing that with precision and concentration, we see voter registration different between the two parties. You can't have participation without registration. And I think those are the small, minor details that in the end give us an uptick or an advantage going into election day. And keep in mind, as a black voter myself, we tend to tune in later. There's been a large underestimation of African-American men. I am convinced that she's going to get perhaps an even larger share of the African-American vote, in particular black men, than Joe Biden did. And the enthusiasm among black voters will be as strong as it was for Barack Obama's first election.
Let's talk about a red flag that we spoke about that was in the last round. I'm not sure you heard it with regard to the silver surge with Tom Bonnier and those voters over 65 in, let's say, blue wall states. They're turning out in larger proportion for the Democrats than Republicans at this point. Does that bode a problem for Donald Trump come Election Day?
It certainly might. Seniors obviously very high propensity voters. They're typically always going to turn out. I think some of this is my guess, some of this is people are just getting more used to participating in early voting. I mean, this is a relatively newer part of the system, and I think people, especially after 2020, got used to going early, voting by absentee. I think we're going to start seeing just a changing makeup of how people go out and vote. I've seen polls showing a wide range of whether or older Americans are voting more for Republicans or Democrats this year. I don't know that you can take too much of that. But certainly if they're showing up like that in Tom's data, in those states that are so critical for her, they got to be happy if
I think he was talking specifically about Pennsylvania, that being the case. Okay, last question. It's going to be to both of you. And the question is, what are the headlines come Wednesday morning? Maybe we should say Friday morning, because who knows, if we'll be able to have a full count by then. But just give me a big headline that'll wrap this thing up. What do you think, Antoine, you first?
Well, election week is going to end with simply Kamala Harris make history, and the United States continues its track towards progress and perfection.
Okay. What do you think?
It's got to be something about how deeply divided we are, how evenly divided we are, which is what blows me away. We know that the country is very deeply divided, but the fact that we are so evenly divided,
I can't get over that either.
So I'm worried about what happens to the country after this election, because the Republicans are very convinced they're going to win, and Democrats are going to be very upset if Donald Trump does win. And certainly,
vice versa.
And certainly, if we know that if Kamala Harris does win, I think we can be assured that Donald Trump is not going to take that graciously, and we may be in for a long road after that.
Okay. Well, then that means you have to come back and help us through it, Brendan Buck. After you run the marathon tomorrow, good on you. We're going to be cheering you on. Antoine, we'll see you again soon, too. Thank you so much for your time.
A superstar, LeBron James, just endorsed Vice President Harris and added this video to his post of support.
We're going to indemnify police officers and law enforcement from being destroyed by the radical left. You're changing history. You're changing culture.
Of course I hate these people. And let's all hate these people, because maybe hate is what we need.
Next to that video, James asks, what are we even talking about here? Which, great question. And last night, rapper Cardi B campaigned with Harris in Milwaukee, responding to Donald Trump's claim that he will, quote, protect women.
Trump says he's going to protect women whether they like it or not. Well, if his definition of protection is not the freedom of choice, if his definition of protection is making sure our daughters have fewer rights than our mothers, then I don't want it!
Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts. She has been on a swing state blitz for the Harris-Wells campaign. She's set to visit Georgia again on Sunday and Pennsylvania on Monday. Congresswoman, welcome.
Good to be with you. Welcome, Congresswoman. I would like to note that, you know, I am regularly in Washington, D.C., mistaken for the Congresswoman at a restaurant. Why? I don't know. I think because she is fabulous, and I'd like to hope I represent you well in those moments. I know that you and the members of the Congressional Black Caucus have been on a bus tour, actually, over the last couple of weeks, and it took you to many places within North Carolina. Can you just bring us into what you are seeing on the campaign trail and what specifically is resonating with voters?
Absolutely. You know, members of our Democratic caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus, we've been deployed, you know, barnstorming, you know, all over in these critical battleground states. And it was wonderful to be on the Congressional Black Caucus Institute bus. And I'll just say one of the things that I've been most heartened and encouraged by is that in the past, as a surrogate, when I've gone to Georgia, I've mostly been in Atlanta. When I've gone to Pennsylvania, I've mostly been in Philadelphia. But in the Harris-Walz campaign, we have stood up infrastructure in counties throughout these states, respectively. And so we're touching people in Meadville, Pennsylvania. We're touching people in Princeville, North Carolina. We're going to Erie, Pennsylvania. We're going to places where people have not been engaged for a very long time, and they are so excited. It lets them know that their vote matters and that they are seen. I'm seeing people who are phone banking for the first time in their lives, door knocking for the first time in their lives, making a donation, sowing a seed from $5 and up for the very first time in their life, traveling to states for the very first time because they understand just how high the stakes are and that the contrast could not be sharper. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they mean to take us back to Jim Crow and then some. They want to control our wombs. They want to control the classrooms. They want to control our bedrooms. They mean to control every aspect of our lives. They mean harm to every person that calls this country home. Whereas Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they're about our freedoms, restoring those that have been gutted, preserving them, expanding upon those, and taking us into the future, centering the humanity and the dignity of every worker, of every person, of every family model that calls this country home. So I have to say I'm experiencing two things out there on the trail. One, people are very afraid. They are afraid, but they're also hopeful. And both of those variables have people motivated to do things they've never done before.
Congresswoman, I want to pick up on something you said, because I think in some aspects it has gotten lost in translation, and it was brought home, at least for me, in a very profound way by the ad that accompanied LeBron James's endorsement, where there's the visual of the arc of history of Jim Crow and racism and segregation and the ugliness. You know, the quotes of Donald Trump said, you know, I hate these people. We should all hate these people. Maybe we should bring hate back. And this was from the 80s, and now that's being lived out in his presidential campaign. And you just touched on, you know, this sort of wanting to pull us back into this era. Talk about the resistance to that, because I think it runs deeper than folks may realize in this campaign, not just for what we see around abortion and reproductive health and things like that, but even more broadly, where I think Americans, and you're being on the ground, I'm wondering if you're seeing and hearing some of this, are just to a point where they go, wait a minute, hold up, what are we talking, as LeBron said, what are we talking about here? Are we really prepared to do that? Do you sense that in these final hours of the campaign that folks are really resisting this pull back to an era where we're leveling up Jim Crow, for God's sake?
Absolutely. And again, recognizing that the Harris-Walz ticket, you know, we are the underdogs. We know that. That's why we are doing everything to earn the trust and confidence and the votes of as many people as possible. And what I'm experiencing on the ground is that for those people that are late breaking in their decision, they are breaking to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, given the stakes that we just enumerated here. People do not want to go backwards. You know, one of the stops that we had during the Congressional Black Caucus Institute bus tour was in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we went to the Civil Rights Museum there. And we we're very honored to touch the lunch counter that launched us into an incredible movement of desegregating lunch counters throughout the country, thanks to these 4 brave young Black men. And it was just such a reminder of that we're on the precipice of going back again to Jim Crow and then some. And I do see, feel, and hear on the ground that people understand that and they do not want to go back. But moreover, that they understand that they deserve more from a president than someone that wants to normalize school shootings, someone that wants to eliminate Head Start, someone who doesn't, who wants to deny women the agency over their very bodies. And in many ways, the women of this country, given a march towards a nationwide ban on abortion, a nation of forced birth, we're talking about just normalizing the slow death of women. Doctors are rendered helpless and unable to help them in a case of an emergency. A nation of forced birth when we have a Black maternal morbidity crisis. A nation of forced birth where we have no universal child care, no paid leave. People want more, and they know that they deserve more. So what I'm seeing and feeling on the ground is for those that are late breaking and making a decision that they are breaking for the Harris-Walz ticket, they know that Kamala Harris is qualified, she is poised, and she is ready. And they also recognize this because, you know, perfection is never on the ballot. But in this moment, everything is on the line. Our democracy is on the line, our fundamental freedoms, and they know that she'll be a partner that they can hold accountable as well.
Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's good to see you.
Joining me right now, we have Anderson Clayton, chair of North Carolina's Democratic Party, who's going to agree with me. It's a very important day there, and it's good to see you again. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, they are neck and neck in the polls. They are both making stops in North Carolina today. Give me a sense of the mood there with the early voting closing less than 2 hours now.
Democrats are excited and we're motivated to still get people to the polls in the last 2 hours. We've got canvass launches going on all day today with folks out knocking doors and pulling people out of their homes to get to the polls if they need to remind them that we don't want them to wait until Election Day because we fully expect there to be lines on Election Day in North Carolina as well. But look, we know that Donald Trump being in the state as much as he is does mean that he's nervous about North Carolina, and Republicans do not win the White House this year without winning our state. So Democrats feel motivated on the ground, and we're excited to keep knocking doors and pulling out people and making sure that, to the point that was made earlier, we are having those tough conversations at the doors with voters who may be undecided still.
Yeah. And look at the early vote. More than half of North Carolina's registered voters, they've already done it. More women have turned out than men. Meanwhile, slightly more Republicans than Democrats have voted early. And then you've got the other third of voters who've cast a ballot. They are unaffiliated. What are these early voting numbers telling you?
I mean, I joke with folks right now, you know, early vote is like doing an autopsy on a live person at this moment in time because it's still taking place. We'll have more information after Sunday and being able to look into the data more. But you also have to understand that in North Carolina, partisanship doesn't tell you everything, and how people are registered right now is, you know, it can be misleading in some cases. A lot of folks in rural North Carolina are registered unaffiliated or registered Republican because majority of those elections there at the local level are decided at a Republican or on a Republican ballot in a primary because of the way that the county is registered. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that, you know, also being registered as an unaffiliated in North Carolina allows you to be able to pick which ballot you go in a primary and vote on. So there's a lot of reasons why we see people and why we see the numbers that we do. And we also know that Republicans have been telling their voters over the last 2 election cycles to get out and vote early. And so we also see it's not taking away or creating new voters for the Republicans, but it's just taking away voters from their Election Day percentages. And so we still feel optimistic about unaffiliated voters too. Under 45s are definitely turning out for us right now. And so we also are looking at the fact that a lot of our unaffiliated voters who are younger are coming out for Democrats because of issues like abortion rights, housing rights this year, and wanting to make sure that, you know, their fundamental freedoms are protected at the ballot box. So we still feel optimistic.
As you well know, the Harris campaign has poured energy into deep red countrypolitan or ex-urban areas around Charlotte and Raleigh. An Atlantic piece focused on Gastonia County, for example, that's where Donald Trump is right now. Democrats are hoping the changing demographics there could help Harris. Does it seem to be paying off?
In Gaston County, definitely, we have a lot of good county party members out there for the Democrats that have come up out of the blue recently, honestly, and are trying to make sure that there's a Democratic presence in those counties, because we know that rural communities matter this year. And North Carolina is a state that's historically won and lost on the margins. And a lot of those margins come from the fact that we used to lose rural counties, by 60-40 margins. And over the last 2 election cycles, we've been losing them by 80-20 margins. And a lot of that is just because of rural Democrats feeling like they do not have somebody at the ballot box to vote for, and that they have felt underrepresented. And, our party made a huge effort, thanks to our House and Senate caucuses, leadership from our party this year that stepped up and said, we want to contest every single state House and Senate race across North Carolina because we want to give people somebody to vote for. And so we have champions that are running, even in gerrymandered districts this year, that are making and putting in that effort for us to be able to get people to the polls, regardless of what your county might vote with.
Historically, North Carolina has voted Republican the last 3 elections, but 4 years ago, it was the state where Trump won his slimmest victory, roughly 74,000 votes or so. What will you be watching Tuesday night that will suggest a good night there for Vice President Harris?
Well, we're definitely going to be looking at places like Mecklenburg and Wake County, our 2 largest Democratic strongholds in the state, but also counties like Wilson and Nash and Edgecombe in the northeastern part of the state, and even counties out in the west like Buncombe and Transylvania and Jackson counties too, and looking at pulling back some of our Democratic strongholds in the west, hopefully. Transylvania County and Buncombe County right now are outperforming statewide averages for early vote totals, and so or statewide early vote totals, and so we're really paying attention to how the west is operating and places where our Democrats are still have political power in them.
Given this interview and all that you've given us, clearly chair of North Carolina's Democratic Party. It's good to see you, Anderson Clayton. Thank you so much. Best of luck.